listening to Your Money, Your Purpose, the podcast where money meets meaning. Hosted by financial advisors Billy Zarello and Brian Eckert, this isn't your typical advisor podcast. Around here, we don't just talk spreadsheets and strategy, we talk stories, behavior, beliefs, and the emotional side of building real wealth. Each week, Billy and Brian take turns diving into either the technical side of money, like investing, tax strategy, and planning, or the behavioral side, like money patterns, mindset, and emotional clarity. Along the way, they'll be joined by expert guests who bring fresh insight to both. This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not financial advice, and the views shared are those of the hosts and guests, not necessarily those of their firms. Let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Your Money, Your Purpose podcast. I am your host today. And for those that don't know me, my name is Billy Zarello. I am a behavioral wealth coach, also a fully licensed financial advisor. And I am really excited today to be introducing a guest of mine, a friend of mine at this point. And it's going to be a really interesting conversation today. We're going to be talking a lot about surprise, surprise. If you follow me at all on any social media platform, I talk about your money story and how important your story is to how you think about money, how you feel about money, all the different things, right? But really, your story goes beyond just your money, right? It touches every aspect of your life, whether it be your business, your relationships, your personal life, whatever. Those stories become the things that the patterns that you learn, that you take with you, that you do on repeat. And so today I have a very special guest. Her name is Jessica Graham. I'm going to bring her up on stage here in a second, but that's what she specializes in. It's helping you define your story, so that you can live the life that you want to, that you were always meant to, but maybe something was just holding you back and you didn't know. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring her up. I don't want to steal any more of her thunder. I'm going to let her tell her story so that we can get to know her a little bit better and bring some value to you guys today. So without further ado, bringing Jessica on the stage. How are you doing, Jessica?
Good. How are you? This is exciting.
I know. I'm doing great. And for those that don't know, Jessica is like on the other side of the world at the moment. She's in a different country. So that's the power of technology and social media, is that we get to connect with people from all different parts of the world. And so, Jessica, thank you so much for your time, for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This is such a cool way of connecting.
It really is. And that's a great kind of segue into kind of like how we kind of connected, right? We connected on LinkedIn, and I think we really connected. And before we kind of get into what you do and stuff like that, and if you can hear my dog bark in the background, I apologize. That is, probably the mail's being delivered, or Amazon's probably at the door, most likely. we all have had Amazon at our front door.
Yeah.
But we met on LinkedIn and we kind of connected around your story, and rewriting it, really.
Right. We did. And you're such a commenter on LinkedIn. So people who know you know that about you. But yeah, because I love to share. I'm a writer at heart. I think that's my best way of communicating. And I use my platform now a lot to really share my experiences. What I find to be interesting is just really like disclosing the turning points. Like, what have you gone through? What were those challenges that maybe you went through? How did you navigate it? I feel inspired when I hear other people's kind of challenge, turning point, transformation stories. So I like to share mine too. And that's what we connected over. Oh, you're muted.
That's the powers of technology, right? When it works, it's great. When it's not, it's a double-edged sword. So, but going back to that, right? And so for me personally, like the reason I started to want to help people rewrite their money stories, because I noticed how my own story was affecting me, right? And that's kind of the birth of, rewriting your money story. So like, in your line of work, why did you get into like, or what was that moment that you're like, if I was basically like, if my story is affecting me this much, other people's stories have to be affecting them, and I need to help with that, right? So kind of walk us through that. Like, what was the starting point where you're like, hey, like this is a big deal for people?
Yeah. My starting point really started like 15 years ago, a long time. And I always say that that was like my first rock bottom. I've had rock bottom since then, but that was, I think when you know what a rock bottom is, like you've experienced one, you're like, oh, okay, I remember that first one, because it's really the thing that gets you completely pivoted onto a new path. And so mine happened 15 years ago. And in that pivot, that was the first time that I got therapy. My therapist recommended me to Al-Anon 12-step program. And in all of that, I think recovery itself, like really going to those meetings, is where I started to see and witness the power of stories. People are
Mm,
sharing their stories in those meetings from a very real, raw, vulnerable place. And they're not doing it to try to get likes and to try to get clout. They're literally in there having a moment and sharing whatever is on their heart. They always say in those meetings, like, you're sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And I think the experience, strength, and hope part is very important, because it's like we can easily get stuck in where we are right now. And if I'm going to just be festering on my current circumstances, but not having that little glimmer of like, okay, how I don't like where I am right now. So how can I like bridge this? If you don't have that bridge, it's like easy to just stay stuck in the muck. So I say all of that because that really showed me for the first time, like what real vulnerability looks like, and
mm,
that being vulnerable is actually a skill that you learn. And so I learned that skill. And I think that helped me in my next chapters, which, like, the next big thing that happened was I moved abroad for the first time. And I was an international school teacher, booping around, traveling, teaching in different places. And I think, like, hindsight's 2020. At the time, I didn't really recognize this, but I recognize it a lot now, is that exchanging stories and that gift of vulnerability is what helped me build all of these relationships that I've built along the way with people from other cultures, other countries, other native tongues all over the world, and then maintain those relationships and those friendships. Um, and I think that without my ability to kind of hold space for people and to allow them to open up and share and show up exactly how they are today, I don't know if those relationships could have happened that way. And so that kind of snowballed into starting my business years later, leaving the classroom and helping people write, but like writing for someone and telling their story for them
mm,
is, it almost like takes the power away from them to be able to share their own story. And I didn't like that. I saw where the disconnect was happening. I saw the people say, oh my gosh, this story is so great. Like, I love the way that you outlined it, and I didn't see my story in that way. And I'm like, awesome, here you go. And then they would come to me later and say, like, I love it, but I don't know how to share it. Like, I don't know how to say that. I don't know how to like show up as that story. And I was like, oh, there's a disconnect here. And so when I looked back at like all of the tools that I learned 15 years ago and have like continued to like, sharpen those tools and like use them a lot, I really was like, okay, I think these things can help people really better understand their own stories and like where is that disconnect between like your experience that you lived, like it's not a fake false memory experience, it really happened, but why is it that you're having a really hard time sharing that? And so I've been helping people really unpack that disconnection and kind of turn that whatever transformation story, your turning point stories, all of those challenges into really like empowering stories, narratives.
I love that answer. I love the fact that you brought up vulnerability, right? I think that is a lost art in this world. It's definitely a skill. It's not something. And the thing about vulnerability is, like, I heard someone say, like, you don't want to bleed all over somebody, but you want to be open, right? You want to be open enough so that you can let people in. And the thing I love about hearing stories, like the hearing about your story or hearing about somebody else's story, tying it back to that word that you mentioned, hope, right? Hope is a very powerful thing in this world. Somebody without hope is a lost person, right? You can't even see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so when I think the turning point for me was, my goal was always to help people, and I just didn't know how to help people, but I knew I had a story, and I think people don't realize how powerful. They're like, oh, well, my story's not that, powerful, or, it's just like, I don't really want to share it. No one's going to care. Like, people do care. And the reason that people care is because they need hope. And if they hear your story, that might be the hope they need. That might be the hope they need to make it through the next month, the next week, the next hour. And so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, like vulnerability and how we can practice that. I'd love to get your insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about, as I said, vulnerability being a learned skill, because I really do believe that, I mean, I grew up in a house where talking about your feelings and being open about what's really going on was not acceptable. Like everything was very shoved under the rug, and we don't talk about that. Even though there's like a massive elephant in the room, we are not going to talk about that. And so I kind of knew how to be a little bit vulnerable with people that felt safe to me, who were my closest friends. So they were my like safe people, my secret keepers. But if it came to like actually needing to be any kind of vulnerable with like people that weren't in that safe space bubble, I wasn't going to do it. So that always meant I was performing. I was on my perfectionist thing. And it was like these walls were always up because I didn't want people to really know the real me. Because I thought if they found out what was really going on, they would judge me, hate me, ridicule me, hold it over me, whatever. And so when I learned the safety, because I think that's where like vulnerability can happen, but you need to have that safe space to do it. I think a lot of people try to do it, and then at some point, maybe they try it and it's been whatever the information that they shared has been weaponized against them. And so then they're like, I'm not going to do that again. Why am I going to do that again? And it makes sense. And that's not their fault. But I think when you go with the intention of like, okay, I want to start being more vulnerable because I want deeper connections. Because if you are willing to be vulnerable with other people and allow that safe space for the other person to also be vulnerable back with you, then that's the intimacy and the emotional connection that like most of us are looking for. But if you can't do that, like you're never going to get that closeness with somebody, right? So like I always advise people who are kind of starting on this journey and maybe they have been hurt before to really like find that person that you can practice this with, because it's not something that, I mean, I saw it in my meetings too. Most people that would show up for the first time, they were not willing to just be like, this is what's going on, and like unload everything. They're sitting in the corner watching and like looking terrified. But then they start to see like, oh my God, that person just shared that and like people didn't throw tomatoes at them. That's crazy, you know? And like, then you're like, oh, so this is a safe space. And it's like, we can create those spaces for other people. We can have that with our friends. We can do it even in business relationships. But like you have to be willing to be open with the other person to create that safety, you know?
Yeah. Something that was running through my mind as you were kind of talking, you kept mentioning the word safety, right? And it's funny now, right? There's still parts, that of my story that I haven't fully released yet. And it's not because I don't feel safe. It's just like, maybe I'm not ready to release that quite yet. But I would say 90% of my story, maybe 95% of my story is out there. And what I love about, once you get to that place of being safe and sharing your story, like I'm almost excited to share my story with people. Like when I meet with a client for the very first time, a lot of people talking about your money is a very vulnerable place to be. Like it, especially if you haven't had that conversation with yourself yet, to have it with somebody else is daunting. Like I get it. I understand when people get on the call with me, they probably feel anxiety. They probably feel all the things, all the feelings, right, around their money. And one of the first things I do is like, I open up to them and I tell them my story, like how my parents got divorced and how that led to all the problems that I dealt with as a kid and as an adult and in my relationship. And I kind of put the cards on the table and I'm like, hey, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I want you to feel like this is a safe place for you to open up about whatever's on your mind. And I think that's important to, like you said, to get those reps, right? To get the reps in so that you can get really comfortable at sharing your story, because it no longer has a grasp on you, right? It doesn't hold the same power it did, right? You've almost taken that power away from it and are using it to amplify other people. I don't know if you feel the same way, but that's kind of how I vision my story now. Is like, no, this is a tool I get to use to help other people.
100%. And I think that place where you're able to use your story to empower other people, that's after you've done the processing and the work and all of that on it. Because when you're in the midst of it and you have no idea what's going on, that's when it is just, you said something earlier and you said it much nicer than I'm about to say, but that's like literally verbal diarrhea at that point. Like if you're just like, this is what happened, and it's always about like, what is the intention of the message? Like, am I sharing this, like you're saying, because I want to help other people and I know that this story is going to help them? Or am I sharing this because I need something from you? I need that reassurance from you. I need your acceptance. I need your love. That's like where you can see where the story has been processed versus not processed.
Yeah, that is a really good point. You could, that second avenue, that story still holds power over you, right? Because you haven't felt that validation internally yet, right? You don't have that inner validation, and you're seeking for validation from other people, and that's what, to tie this all to money, right? In this sense, you start to look for the external things. So you start looking at your career, like, oh, I can start working harder and earning more money and buying all the stuff and just trying to fill that void when it can never be filled. It can never be filled with anything from the external world because you haven't processed your own story.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And like, I mean, I think with that too, there's an element of what are my values? What is really important to me? And like, what's my purpose? I think when you have a better idea of those things, that helps minimize the power of whatever the experience that you've had has over you. Cause it's like, for me, I feel like I've had a lot of hard experiences in my life. And I can choose to look at that stuff and be like, oh, poor me. Like that,
Yeah.
it's been so hard. Or I can look at it and be like, yeah, I've gone through a lot of that. I've also survived it. I've learned so many lessons through each like experience that I've had. And it's always continuously showing me the best parts of myself. Like I get to grow from all of those experiences. I get to come into more of my true, authentic self. And so then I can look back and have more gratitude for what's happened and kind of take that. That's where it's like the flipping of the story. You get to flip the narrative from being something that didn't serve you to being something that like totally served you and elevated you, you know?
Yeah. I love, man, when you were talking about being grateful for all the things that have happened to you, right? Like, yes, like it's hard to be grateful in the moments when you're in the valley, right? Because you're in it and it's hard. But then, like you said, hindsight's kind of 2020, and looking back, you'd be like, I learned a lot in that moment. And it reminded me of this incredible quote by, I think his name's Stephen Colbert, right? I think he's a host of a late night show, but he said something to the effect of like, it's a gift to exist, and to exist is to experience pain and pleasure. So you have to be grateful for existing, and that means you have to be grateful for both of those things because it's a gift to exist. And that when I heard him say that, I was like, what? Like that's crazy to think about. Why would I be grateful for all the hard times? And then I look back and then I say, that's all part of the story, right? That was all part of the story that was written that has put me where I am today. And if I didn't live that story, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. I wouldn't be helping the people. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We would have never have met. And so I tend to go down the rabbit hole on those types of things. Like, you know, what are the chances of us meeting? And it wouldn't have been if you didn't have the story that you did, and I didn't have the story I did, this conversation is probably never happening. And that's
Right.
kind of the power of your story.
Oh yeah.
Kind of gives me
Totally.
chills.
I know, me too. I love it. And just like, I mean, I think from a business standpoint, also like a financial standpoint, I want to be surrounded by the people that I know have lived through something and like have the tale to tell. There's something about that. And whenever I say that, I know there's people being like, well, I don't have one of those stories. And I don't believe that. Everybody has something. It doesn't have to be like the craziest redemption, like, oh my gosh, I was addicted to crack. And then like, you know, all like, you don't have to have those crazy stories. You can have your life, because if you've lived to be this age or an adult at least, you have lived through stuff. And like, if you are looking back on your life and thinking you don't have anything and you haven't learned anything or you haven't experienced enough, that's when you need to unpack what has happened, because I guarantee there are so many things that you have trudged through. Like, you have gone through a challenge at some point and come out the other side, and it was not by you sitting there and doing nothing. You did something. You made a choice, right? And I think when you can look back and like start to articulate those moments, then it's like, okay, now I do have a story to share, and it's here to help people, like you're saying. I think that's like one of the biggest reasons that we have all of this, is to help other people. Like, our stories are not meant to be ours alone, and they're just like in our little diaries tucked under our little bedside tables. Like, they're actually meant to serve. And it doesn't mean that like you need to disclose every nitty gritty detail of everything that you've lived, but I think the biggest skill besides the vulnerability is like the curiosity. If I'm curious about what's going on around me, I'm listening to other people, I'm like listening to what they're saying, then something inside of me will probably spark and be like, oh, you should share this story with them, because it's going to give them that hope, like what you were saying at the beginning. And it's like, if you're not curious and you're staying in this like protective little bubble, you're missing out on so many opportunities to be of service in that way.
I love that. And I think that what you just said is a perfect segue into what we kind of want to announce. For everybody that's listening, we have a very special announcement, and it has a lot to what you were just alluding to. It's perfect how things work out, right? Sometimes. But we have a very special announcement. We are actually, Jessica and I are going to be hosting a webinar, and it is going to be about writing your story. And really, it's going to be called Rewriting Your Founder Story, right? And so this is going to be, next month. It's going to be the 25th of September. It's going to be 11 a.m. Eastern time. So whatever time zone that you're in, just be ready. There'll be a couple of announcements and stuff that's coming out. So, stay tuned for that. But what we want to do, make a little shift in this podcast. This is very different from other podcasts that I've done. And so we're going to make a shift, and we're going to talk a little bit about this webinar. So, but before we kind of get into that, just like, I'm super excited about this webinar. I think this is going to be very profound for a lot of people on learning the steps to kind of rewriting their story.
Right. I agree. And we say rewrite instead of write, because it is like observing what you've come through and being like, you know what, the next chapter, I kind of want it to look like this. So where do I need to rewrite it so that we can get there?
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
And so how we kind of came up with this was, again, a lot of what we just talked about, right? And Jessica kind of alluded to it. We all have a story, but we're not taught to be vulnerable. We're not taught to open up to people. We're not taught those skills. And so it's just like anything else in this world, we have to learn those skills, right? And so that, more or less, that's kind of how we came together on this idea. That's, when we originally met, we were like, what can we collab on? Because we are both saying the exact same thing, but just two different, I guess, I don't want to say audiences, but just two different, like it's the same path that kind of branches out a little bit, right? Like it kind of deviates a little bit, because I specifically talk about your money story, right? You're specifically, talking to those business owners. So it is a little bit different, but foundationally, would you agree that it's the same premise?
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Same premise. Yeah. And like, I mean, we both saw the same thing. That's what led us here, right? Because we're working with people and we're seeing these loops and we're seeing these patterns being played out and we're seeing how those patterns and loops are getting them stuck. And we know firsthand what helped us get unstuck. So it's like, well, let's help them get unstuck too. And really, that is rooted in the story.
Yeah. So I'm just going to ask this question. So if somebody's listening to this right now, I have my answer, but I'd love to hear your answer as well. So why does this matter? Why should someone show up to this? Why does your story matter?
I think your story matters because it just plays into every decision that you're making, every the way that you're showing up, the way that you're communicating. And so it's having such a big impact. And we're talking specifically to your business, but like
Yes.
it's impacting your finances, it's impacting your relationships, it's impacting your parenting, it's everything. And so I believe that when you start to do this work, there's a lot of what I see my clients go through is like these light bulb kind of aha moments of, because it really is about reflecting and getting like radically honest with yourself. That's where like the vulnerability piece comes first, is like you being vulnerable with you before you're getting even vulnerable with other people. And you start to see like, oh, wow, didn't even know that was there. Or I didn't put that together with this and I didn't see how that was in relation to each other and how this is impacting all of this. So I think that's my answer to that, but I want to hear your answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to tag along with a lot of your answer. I'm a firm believer that everything begins and ends in your brain, in your mind, right? It all begins and ends here. And so dreams either are born there or they die there. And a lot of that has to do with your beliefs, and your beliefs about yourself come from the stories that you were told, that you lived, um, that are a part of you. And for so many of us, we go through this world on autopilot, right? We're just like, everything's random. It just happens just happens to us. And what's amazing about your story is that it really opens up you to be more aware. Like Jess was saying earlier, like I'm more aware of other things that are going on around me. And it's not necessarily something that those events that you can control, but you're more aware and you can show up differently in those moments, right? Like when I think about like somebody spending money and they're like, oh, I spend way too much money, right? It's like, what's wrong with me? It's like, nothing's wrong with you. It's something that you were sold. It's something that your parents told you. It's something that, an ex-spouse told you, or something that got ingrained in you, that became a part of you, that became a part of your thinking, your beliefs. Those beliefs lead to your actions. Like you can look at any action that you take in this world and you can connect it to a belief. And you get to question whether or not those beliefs serve you. And the only way you can do that is by bringing awareness to where you came from, how you grew up, the stories that you learned, how things were talked about in your house. If I'm specifically talking about money, like who talked about money? How was money talked about in your house? What was your earliest childhood memory of money? Like all those factors play a major role into the choices that you make. And I know, because I lived that story. I know what it's like to be very fearful of money. And that was directly linked to both of my parents arguing every night about money, right? I vividly remember that at 10 years old, them sitting in the kitchen screaming at each other about money. So that was going to be a part of my story, whether I wanted it to be or not. I think that's something people also need to realize. Like, you don't often in that early part of our lives get the choice of the stories that you're told. right? Or the things that you see. But when you bring awareness around those things, as you get older, you get to define what you want your life to look like. And I don't think you have that choice consciously if you don't understand and bring awareness to your story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And like, it's not even like so much of what we've lived and witnessed, that itself doesn't even become necessarily the story. It's like the story we told ourselves about that thing that we witnessed, right? So then it's like, once you start to untangle, because this is a lot of tangled stuff, and then once you start to untangle it, then you start to see, and you get to go down that little hole to that one thing that's kind of the thing. Like I always call it your like root trigger, like that thing that just kind of keeps showing up, but it's showing up in different ways. And then once you can identify that, because it really is like once you're aware of that, then you can start making those next decisions to like, okay, I'm not going to respond the way that I used to respond when I feel like this because blah, blah, blah. And you can like have this whole new narrative and whole new way of just making those next choices, responding to life in a different way. It's incredible.
Yeah. I think just look when we were just looking over the outline and everything like that, I am super excited for this because I think it's going to be really profound for people. It's going to be really actionable, easy. There's going to be exercises for you all to do. It's not going to be where we're just preaching to you. Yeah. We've all been on those webinars before where you just get preached to for, an hour or however long it usually is. And so we want this to be something that you can participate in and start the process, right? And because that's where lives change when we start bringing awareness around those things. So I'm really super excited about, about a month from now, we'll be doing this. So I'm excited.
Me too. Me too.
So, anyways, like I said, we will be releasing some stuff to you so you can sign up, you can register for the event. It is free. It doesn't cost you anything, just some time, right? So make sure you sign up for this, and you'll be seeing some posts from us and whatnot, but just be on the lookout for those invites. But before we jump off, Jess, anything you'd like to add before we jump off here?
No, but thank you for having me, and thank you for accommodating my time zone difference with you. It's very cool that we get to do this with technology these days. So yeah.
Like I said, it's just cool. Yeah, like I said, she's on the other side of the world basically, and so it's kind of cool. I always I love it. So, but anyways, thank you everybody for joining today's podcast. Make sure you always subscribe to this. It always helps the podcast reach more people. And like I said, you'll be seeing some announcements from us here soon, the next couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for that. But have a great rest of your day. And like I always say, go make some good memories with your family and friends. Have a good one.